So for last weekend's game, the thing that I was really impressed about with the Trojans, obviously it was a big game at home, a night game. I was really impressed by the fact that they didn't play down to their opponent. Obviously, we all knew going into the game that Fresno State fans travel well. It was going to be a packed Coliseum, which it definitely was. And I think USC just did a very good job of handling that pressure and doing what they do. They scored on offense. Obviously, some plays were let up on defense, but they got better throughout the game. So that was one thing I was really impressed with, just how well USC handled the pressure of the game on Saturday. Definitely loves to run the ball. And I think USC's run defense has been an issue throughout this season. And so I think just focusing on stopping Oregon State's rushing attack is going to be critical in Saturday's matchup.
Yeah.
Switching over to soccer, women's soccer held off UC Irvine last Thursday in a 3-2 victory. The Trojans improved their overall record to 4-1-1 on the season and will play at home against Stanford on Friday for what will be their first Pac-12 matchup of the season.
It's going to be a good one.
After seeing how the Trojans looked against UC Irvine, what do you guys think are some areas that they need to improve on as we look at these highlights here in order to beat Stanford on Friday? And as we see in these last highlights, the Trojans' last meeting against Stanford came in October of last year, and USC took the victory in an exciting overtime matchup. Simone Jackson scored a goal in the 52nd minute of the game, and Croy Bethune scored 2 goals. Her first goal came in the 54th minute of the game, and her second goal came in the 92nd minute of the game to give USC a 3-2 overtime victory. And with that win, USC improved their record to 14-2-2 on the season, and the win marked their first victory against Stanford since 2016. I was just really impressed with how the USC defense sort of turned the page in the second half, and it really was a tale of two halves because we saw them give up 17 first half points to ASU, and then we only saw them give up 1 touchdown that came late in the game. And it was an emotional game for a lot of players like Eric Gentry, who was playing against his former team. And I just liked how he was able to he and the team overall was sort of able to overcome all of that. After a season low 17 points against Oregon State, USC got back on track against ASU. The Trojans scored 42 points, and it was the 4th time USC has scored at least 40 points this season. USC silenced any doubters of the offense against Arizona State. Caleb Williams threw for a season-high 348 yards and 3 touchdowns. Williams' elusiveness was on display with 44 yards on the ground and 1 rushing touchdown. Running back Travis Dye scored 2 more touchdowns to give him 5 on the season, and wide receiver Jordan Addison had 105 receiving yards. Brendan Rice had a season-high 72 yards, and wide receiver Kyron Hudson caught his first touchdown of the season for the Trojans. After watching these highlights, what are your guys' thoughts on the USC offense? Thanks again, Bobby, for coming in. We know this game is going to be competitive, but how do you all think the USC offense will respond to Washington State's pressure on defense? And so, moving on to soccer, women's soccer had another successful weekend up in Oregon. The Trojans defeated Oregon State 5-1 on Thursday and Oregon 4-0 on Sunday, improving their record to 7-1-1. And moving up 12 spots to number 8 in the United Soccer Coaches Power Rankings. The Trojans are now 3-0 in conference play. The team has not lost a game since their first match against Purdue. On Thursday, senior midfielder Croy Bethune had 1 goal and 2 assists against the Beavers. USC dominated the entire game, allowing just 7 shots from the Beavers compared to the Trojans' 26. Following a win in Corvallis, the team headed to Eugene, where they handed the Ducks a 4-0 loss on Sunday. The women of Troy came out firing, scoring 3 goals in the first half. The team dominated the offense as they outshot Oregon 26-7. Midfielder Croy Bethune scored 2 of those 3 goals in the first period. After Croy's outstanding performance this weekend, she earned Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week. And the women will look ahead to this weekend as they play Arizona tomorrow at 3:30 and Arizona State Sunday at noon. Head over to Stoney McAllister to watch these Pac-12 matchups. What record do you guys think the Trojans will finish with this weekend? I'll definitely be excited for the football game. Washington State coming in. They've played some really good opponents this year. They won't be afraid of the moment. It's going to be a really good game. And then just with other sports like water polo, soccer, and volleyball, it's just so cool to be at a school where every sport seems to be doing well right now. So there should definitely be a lot of great action going on this weekend. The women of Troy entered the NCAA tournament as a number 4 seed and will play against UC Irvine in their first tournament game Saturday at 1 p.m. at Stoney McAllister Field. As we take a look at the bracket, we see the Trojans will play UC Irvine as a number 4 seed, and if they can secure the victory, a matchup with Brown or Rutgers will be on the horizon. The Trojans' path to the number 4 seed came via an upset victory over the, at the time, number 1 UCLA Bruins. The Trojans shut out the Bruins 2-0 to secure their first win over UCLA since 2015. The Trojans struck first and didn't look back against the Bruins, as the first goal of the game was scored by Kaylin Martin in the 15th minute. Zoe Burns scored USC's second goal after converting a penalty kick in the 29th minute. The defense may have been the story of the game, though, for USC, as the Bruins were shut out and held to just 10 shots in the afternoon. Anna Smith made key contributions for the Trojan defense as she came up with 5 saves in what was the 7th shutout of the year for USC. With the big win over the Bruins, the Trojans will surely have a lot of momentum entering the tournament. What stood out to all of you the most about USC's performance on Friday? Looking ahead to the matchup against UCI on Saturday, the two teams did meet earlier in the season on September 15th at home in a matchup that resulted in a 3-2 win for the Trojans. USC's first matchup against UCI was the second home game of the season for USC, as Zoe Burns scored the first goal for USC in the 4th minute and assisted Simi Awujo on the second goal as USC jumped out to a 2-0 lead in the first 10 minutes. Aaliyah Farmer scored a goal in the 24th minute to make the score 3-0. In the second half, UCI started to get going as Sophie Gillies scored a goal in the 50th minute. In the 82nd minute, Emily Castagna scored a UCI second goal of the game. With what we have seen this year from the Trojans, how far do you guys see them going in the NCAA tournament? And Justin, like you said, I think the theme of this is that USC has to win out. They have to win their final 3 games, but I'm just not convinced that they can do it because of how much the defense has struggled with inferior teams. We got UCLA coming up after Boulder, and then we have Notre Dame. I'm not convinced that the Trojans can win both of those games. I'm sold on the offense. I'm just not sold on how the defense is looking so far. And that's going to be the key when it comes to winning 2 games against 2 upcoming teams that are ranked and very good coming up. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you have to look at how impressive it has been for USC's offense to maintain scoring all these points without 2 of their best players in Jordan Addison and Mario Williams. And you look at Taj Washington, who has been playing well, but you also have to look at, like we mentioned, Michael Jackson III, season high in catches last Saturday against Cal. And Taj Washington, like you said, but also Kyle Ford, who had a 100-yard game against Arizona. It's just impressive to see how Lincoln Riley and the offense are utilizing these guys that they have, and the chemistry that Caleb Williams seems to be finding with some of his top targets. And running back Raleek Brown, I think, is someone that's getting used a little bit more and getting a little more comfortable in this offense as well. Well, I think the first thing you have to look at with this USC defense is that Eric Gentry, their leading tackler, and arguably one of their best defensive players this year for sure, hasn't been around. He's been out the last few games with an injury. But I think it's just getting some of the basics down on defense. We're giving up a lot of big plays. Guys like Tuli Tuipulotu, he's talked about in practice how missing some assignments, missing some stuff that can be easily fixed to stop giving up some of these big plays. I think it'll just go back to what made them successful at the beginning of the season, getting those assignments figured out and forcing some turnovers, because USC was forcing so many turnovers at the beginning of the season, and we've seen that sort of slow down. So I think that's something they need to get back to as well. Yeah, like you said, the score was 33-14 at one point, and then Cal went on to score. They went on to finish the game with 35 points, I believe. And so, yeah, like you said, the defense has just got to figure out how to close these games and not. I think the key to the game is obviously this has to be the bounce back game where the defense figures it out and builds up some confidence before USC goes on the road to play UCLA and Notre Dame comes to the Coliseum in a big game that will ultimately decide their playoff fate, depending on how these next 2 games go, whether they beat Colorado and UCLA. So I'm gonna have my eyes glued to the defense the whole time. I want to see if they can make some stops, force some turnovers, make some big plays. I'm not worried about the offense at all this week.